So welcome to Reconnection, the podcast where we bring together rare disease patients, medical professionals, and the public, and to spark awareness, share stories, and seek solutions. I'm your host, Joanna, and imagine catching a simple cold, but instead of bouncing back in a few days, your lungs struggle to recover. Breathing feels heavier, like you're inhaling through a straw. Now imagine your liver, an organ that's supposed to keep your body running, slowly clogging, and with a protein it can't process, putting you at risk for serious disease. This is the reality for people living with alpha-1 Atripsin deficiency.
Atrypsin.
There, a rare genetic disorder that attacks both the lungs and the liver, the liver, often without warning. Today I'm speaking with someone who knows this struggle all too well, Chris, or as he's known to many, Mr. Ohh. He's not just fighting this condition. He's doing it with humor. Despite weekly infusions to replace the protein his body can't produce, despite developing emphysema, despite the challenges of living with a rare disease that few people even know exist, he refuses to let it define him. Instead, he found a way to laugh through the struggle and turn his experience into something powerful. Through his story, we're going to step into his world. The frustration, the fight, and the unexpected moments of lightness. Because sometimes when life takes your breath away, the only thing left to do is to laugh. Before we begin, just a reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only. Nothing you hear today should be taken as medical advice. Always consult a qualified physician for any medical concerns. Now let's dive in. So, Mr. Ohh, can you tell us, can you take us back to when you were first diagnosed? What symptoms did you?
Well, when I was first diagnosed with alpha-1 antitrypsin, it was in 2017. However, lung problems have cursed me since I was a very young man. So I was actually, and I'm going to tell you a little history first, but I was actually, even as I was in elementary school, I had frequent colds, frequent infections, and trouble breathing. But I grew up in a time when weakness was just not accepted. I mean, I don't know if you've discussed bullying at all, but it was to the point of if I was running and I couldn't run anymore, even the coach would jump on the bandwagon of the student bulliers. So I was always not breathing. So I always just pushed past it of as much as you can. To say I pushed past it is hard, but I got as healthy as I could. I walked quite a lot. I ate properly, and it just never went away. When I was about 30, um, I finally was at my doctor's office and said, like you just admitted, it was like breathing through a straw, or if I had put cotton in my throat and tried to breathe through that. And he basically said, "Oh, asthma." And in his little asthma statement, handed me a albuterol puffer and says, "No problem. Just when you feel bad, just hit this puffer." Well, okay. So with them constantly telling me nothing was wrong, or a minimal of nothing being wrong, I just basically kept saying, okay, and tried to push through it. Now, as a living, I chose to be a comedian. So I was often making jokes, uh, about my situation, and we just kept having a good time with it. But it was always there. And then when I was about 50 is when I really stopped being able to function. And so I went to a pulmonologist officially, and she says, "Well, you don't have asthma, you have extreme asthma." And I said, "All right." And she prescribed an injection of a drug called Xolair, which is actually a allergy medication. And she prescribed that, and I got those injections. And then, as it turned out, I had a stomach issue. And the gastroenterologist said, "Hey, why don't we take a CAT scan of your stomach?" And as my lungs overlap my stomach slightly, she saw that I had big holes in my lungs from the various infections that I'd had over the years. And it was like, oh, okay. And I went back to the pulmonologist, and then the pulmonologist gave me the blood test, and I have alpha 1 antitrypsin deficiency.
Okay.
So, gee, I was only misdiagnosed for 30 some years.
Wow. Uh, so, is any idea on why it takes so long for them to diagnose it, or any?
Because nobody looks for it. And that's the honest truth. And the,
Mhm.
the, the real problem here, and I laugh about this, I love this, is it's a simple blood test. In fact, it's a free, simple blood test. If you send to the Alpha 1 Foundation, they will send you a test that you stick your finger like you would if you were diabetic, put a little drop of blood on the thing, send the strip back, and a week or so later, they send you an email saying, "Hey, you don't have it, or you do have it." And they can even tell you what your genetic code is,
Oh.
but nobody looks for it. They hand you a puffer and say, "Here, try this."
Hmm. So alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency is affects both the lungs and the liver. Did you did one cause problems before the other?
Oh, for me, it was all about the lungs. In fact, I'm tested for my liver often, and my liver function is still good. Um, the thing about alpha 1 is what it is alpha 1 antitrypsin is a protein. What it is it's like your lungs can't repair itself. So your body puts this protein on top of your lungs like peanut butter, and it goes right across your lungs. And when you get a cold, the peanut butter gets scraped off by the cold, but your lungs stay healthy. So now with me is I was not producing this protein. And it's actually not that you're not producing it, is your liver makes it, and it's made wrong for people like myself. And the peanut butter essentially sticks to itself and globules up. And when it globules up, it can't get out of the liver because the capillaries are only so big. And so they can't get out, and it so my lungs aren't getting the protein that is being made, and my liver is being clogged up because it's making proteins that's sticking together. So for me, it was all about the lungs. But I've had lung problems forever. And finding out you have alpha 1 is a shocking thing. I got very depressed and I cried for a couple of weeks. And I did a great big poor me thing and a happy little why me God for a week. But then I remembered that if you can find something funny about it, I did. And I found something funny. And it started out as the whole peanut butter analogy. And it moved into the fact that no matter what, universally, I am the center of the universe. And I know this because the whole universe is out to get me.
How is it out to get you?
Why? Well, it's I lived a very healthy life my entire life, and then it says, well, I think we'll just give him an incurable disease because we're gonna, so I know I'm important to the universe because they're out to get me. It's just said in jest.
Yeah.
Well,
You
I
just
mean,
went through that. Okay.
after living with lung disease for a long time, very long time, to find out that that lung disease is a incurable disease, I was really depressed. I sat down and I did a great big why me. Um, I talked to people, I learned about it, and then I realized that if I sit down, I won't get back up. So I got back up, flushed my little pity pot as were, and said, "Okay, we have to keep moving. We have to move on."
Can you describe what a bad lung day feels like to you? Does it affect both? How does it affect your daily life?
Well, you can't move. Um, imagine a great big, imagine laying on the ground and a great big dog lays across your chest. You just can't breathe. Air does not go in and out. And as far as does it affect my daily life? Yes. I can't walk upstairs. I can't walk up 2 flights of stairs without being short of breath. And as I said, I was doing comedy for a while. I can't talk for 45 minutes straight as a comedian would without starting to cough. So yes, it affects my daily life. And yes, it's like literally having some great big thing sitting on my chest. Even when I'm standing up, that thing is still sitting on my chest.
So how do you do comedy when you can't talk?
I write.
Oh,
I am a humorist. Um, it's adapting, if you will. I currently produce an online column called Mr.Ohh Sideways View, and I talk about any number of things. And I just take a sideways view of the whole life. So, in essence, no, I cannot do comedy, but I can adapt and do something else.
uh, you receive weekly infusions. What is it that like? Does it
Well,
help you? So, oh, right.
it does help, um, but it's not like a cure. It's
Yeah.
basically a maintenance. And what is weekly infusions like? Thank heaven that I have a nurse that I like. She comes to the house, we sit down, sometimes we have coffee, or even if she brings pastry, and she gives me for the next half hour to an hour. She injects me, um, and I have to sit there and get an IV. My refrigerator hasn't has an individual drawer for my medications because of it. But thank heavens for Barbara, who is a wonderful, wonderful person and a nurse. And she comes to the house and she gives me an infusion, because if I had to go to a hospital and do that, as nice and wonderful as they are, it would ruin my whole day. Because after an infusion, right after an infusion, I am always very tired, as if I ran up and downstairs a few times. And I am told that it's because my body is not expecting to have those proteins that she's putting into my body. And I get, and I get, and I have to get, and my body has to get used to it because it's a sudden infusion of something that wasn't there. And that's how I manage it. It's just physically I have to do it, and emotionally, thank heavens for Barbara.
What about physically?
Well, I just have to do it. Like I said, I get tired when it happens. I have to get up early in the morning so that I can be ready for when Barbara gets there, because of course I have to set my kitchen up and turn it into a little hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so physically it's time consuming. Physically it makes me tired. That's it.
AATD makes a recovery from simple colds and flu much harder. Um, how do you protect yourself, especially
Don't go
like
out. And I don't want to cut your things out, but I don't go out. I have to stay in, because
Mhm.
if I go out, I know I am going to get sick. Now I do, if I have to go out, I'll take precautions and wrap my face and I look like the mummy. And I look like that the old little kids where they're wrapped so tight and they look like a tick about they're ready to pop. But that's how I go outside in the wintertime and during cold and flu season. Of course, I get a flu shot every year, and and then I eat well. I have to remember that I can't eat a lot of like fast food or salty foods and things like that.
Mhm. Since AATD is also impacts the liver, you said yours is mostly lungs, so it's
Mostly mine's lungs. And the thing with me, as far as the liver is concerned, it's monitored.
oh.
So it's a funny disease because, there are liver alphas and there are lung alphas. Liver
Hmm.
alphas have cirrhosis essentially because their livers are clogged up. Lung alphas have big holes in their lungs because the protein isn't getting that far. Now, I don't understand all of the details about why one over the other is happens, because even the various biopsies I've had of the liver shows, yes, the alpha one is in there, yes, it's clogging it, but my liver function is still very, very good.
That's good. Uh, so are there people with
There are
both lung
people
and
with
liver?
both.
Yeah.
There are people with both. I've only met one of the various programs I've been to. I've only met one, but it's a sad thing to say, but I probably know 10 liver transplant patients and 7 or 8 lung transplant patients
Mhm.
because of it, because that's really the only cure. If you get
Yeah.
enough holes in your lungs stop working and you have to get them transplanted. The only real cure at this point would be to literally get both lungs and livers transplanted.
Have you had either?
No, I'm actually one of the lucky ones. And I
Hmm.
say that because um, I never smoked. I had basically a healthy lifestyle. And a lot of people go through life not even knowing they've got it because they're healthy people. Whereas a lot of the alphas who smoked over the years, for a number of years, their lungs are completely destroyed.
Mhm.
So by the fact that I was generally healthy, maybe by the fact that I was bullied in elementary school and just pushed and pushed and pushed so hard to be healthy and this, that, actually saved my life. Who knew bullies can be positive?
Mm. I thought about that. Are there things you used to take you used to take for granted that now you now have been extra careful about?
Yes. The biggest one, and you kind of mentioned it, is the stand-up comedy. I grew up when I quit school as an entertainer. I did some singing, I did some comedy, I performed on stage, and now I can't do any of that. I maintain myself in two things. I as I said, I write and I write my humor column and I make people laugh as much as I can. And I also entertain children because, frankly, the attention span of children when you're entertaining children is 15 to 20 minutes, and I can handle 15 to 20 minutes.
So, what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about your condition?
Well, the biggest one is what they call COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. COPD is none of those. It's
Mm.
not. All COPD is a laundry list of other diseases that advertising agencies don't want to talk about because they want to sell drugs. I have four diseases that could be considered COPD. I have asthma and I take drugs for asthma. I have a disease called bronchiectasis. I have emphysema, which is the big holes in my lungs. And I don't even remember the name, Cricastus and a partridge in a pear tree. Anyway, the biggest misconception is if you have a little trouble breathing one day, you say, I have COPD. And you go to your doctor, and your doctor says, okay, it hasn't really been chronic because you just developed it. It is, of course, pulmonary, but and they basically just said, here's albuterol. And albuterol is a bronchodilator, which basically says if your bronchial tubes are starting to swell for any number of reasons, you don't have to have asthma for your bronchioles to swell a little bit. Um, you take a puff on the albuterol puffer and you're all set and you're good. So, but so basically, people look at it at this COPD thing and never stop to think that maybe there's an underlying cause.
Mhm.
Because frankly, if I walk down the street today, right now, I probably couldn't because of the snow, but if I could, um, I could probably half to three quarters of the people could probably pick out of their pockets an albuterol inhaler. Doesn't mean they have alpha 1, certainly, but people look at COPD so blandly that they don't look at the underlying causes.
You said that you combat. You said you that you combat this deadly malady with humor.
Mm.
Why is humor so important into your journey?
Humor is important to everyone's journey. People just don't realize it. Sorry if that sounds rude, and I don't mean to insult any other person. Um, but I like to laugh. And even though laughing is hard for me because of the whole breathing issue, I like to do it. I like to smile. I like I like to listen to stand-up comedians. I like to to be creative. I like to laugh. Um, some people, like if you read blogs and such, they take their illness and they wear it on their sleeve and they say, "Oh, this was a day and I have to write about it because that's going to be therapeutic for me." And that's fine for them. I'm not going to judge them. But what I am going to say is I would rather, as much as possible, forget the disease. Look at humor. Laugh about bad food at McDonald's as opposed to um, crying about my own situation.
Can you share? Can you share your a moment in where laughter helped you through a tough time with your condition?
Yes, I can. When I was just diagnosed, um, the first thing that the the doctor said was, you might have to get some disability income because you will probably won't be able to continue working and like that. And at that time, I had worked full time for 42 years. So when you have to stop, and not like retirement where you say, okay, in 6 months I'm going to retire, or in a year I'm going to retire, and I look at my savings and I say, okay, fine, I'm prepared to retire. Nope. I was literally thrown out. And I say it that way because to say I became disabled isn't funny, isn't entertaining. It's a bad thing. To say I was thrown out has a humorous connotation to it.
Mhm.
And it was then, after a few weeks, that I said, well, if I don't do something, I'm going to cry constantly. So once a week, as I've said, I put together the blog, and I don't mean to say the same things over and over, but once a week, I put together my blog and I say, you know what? I'm going to write my column. And that gets me through the worst days. Sometimes the worst days end up to be my funniest columns.
Have you ever, has there been time, have there been times when people didn't understand your humor about it? How did
Yes.
you handle it? How did you handle that?
Basically it's simple because people look at me and say, I should be somehow for some reason a lot of people believe that I should sit down and not do anything because I'm made of china. I'm made of porcelain and I'll break. And I mean, in essence, I've been fighting breathing issues since I was like 5 to 10 years old. So I'm used to it. And when people look at me and I laugh and I tell them about, hey, yeah, well, I'm not breathing today. Or if they say, how are you? And I say, well, I'm breathing today, but maybe not tomorrow. And they'll look at me and say, you should respect that. You should be serious about it. And how do I handle it? First of all, I try to tell them, no, I shouldn't be serious about it. No, if I was serious about it, it would be a sad thing. And secondly, I try to tell them that how would they rather see me? Laying in a hospital bed as a sick person or hanging out with them drinking a beer and laughing? And every one of them has always said, well, you're right. We'd rather see you sitting around laughing.
Have you noticed certain foods help with help or worsen your symptoms?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there are lots of them. Basically, it's high protein, high carb diet, and it's not as much the foods. Of course, avoid salt, avoid anything pre prepared. Because if I eat like what is would be called a microwave dinner, if I eat three microwave dinners, I will feel awful. So I just don't.
Mhm.
But I avoid prepared foods. I avoid salty foods. I pick up anything that says low salt. I pick it up. Um, but it's basically not so much the food that I'm eating as how I'm eating it. I probably eat 6 to 7 times a day, but I only have a half a sandwich or a small cup of fruit or a this or a that. I do not eat meals because the minute that I put a lot of food into my system, it is a physical thing. It's a weight. And that weight in my stomach and intestines will push on the lungs and cause me to have bad breathing.
Um, since AATD affects the excuse me, let's see. Are there any foods that you avoid?
Fast foods. That it's kind of, I mean, the diet really is simple. High
Mhm.
carb, okay. But the real foods that I avoid are fast foods. Anything convenient, chances are I don't want it.
Hmm. So you do a lot of cooking.
Yep. I love to cook. I love to cook almost as much as I love to laugh, which pleases my wife to no end.
I bet. She doesn't know how to cook.
My wife, it is just as it turns out, my wife is very apathetic about cooking. Yeah, if I have to, I will, but me on the other hand, I love to cook and I love to experiment. Of course, one thing that does drive her crazy is she'll ask me what I'm making for dinner, and I'll say, I don't know until 4 o'clock when she says, you want to start dinner now? And I'll say, oh yeah, well, we have this, this, and this. Maybe I'll make that. And she says, how can you do that? But I love to cook. Cooking is wonderful.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just looking through your refrigerator and saying what you have.
Pretty much. What's there?
Yeah. So, um, let's see. Do you follow any specific guideline to manage your to manage your lung inflammation?
Other than the I take a nebulizer drug a couple times a day, which is basically sitting down and breathing in mist. Play Misty for me, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's and I just breathe mist. So I end up taking a lot of breaks during the day only because, not because I want to, because every so often I have to sit down and take a nebulizer treatment.
Have you managed lifestyle changes besides diet? Um, so you see, have you made lifestyle changes besides diet that help with symptoms?
Um, Now it's wintertime, so you're gonna catch me in a lie, but it's not a lie. Um, I walk whenever I can. I live in a housing complex, a housing tract thing, and I like to walk around it. And what's good about that is, if you go somewhere and you get suddenly tired and you can't function, well, the chances are I'm within a few feet from home anyway, because I'm walking around my house. But I try to walk like 20 minutes a day.
Mhm.
Of course, I don't walk in the snow.
Yeah. So if you can't get out, what do you do then?
Um, wish. I wish I could get out. No, sometimes I will, if I really feel that I need to do something, I will like go to one of the big box stores like Walmart or Target, and you will find that all of them are built on a similar situation where they have stuff all around the outsides, a big square walk around, and stuff on the insides. Well, that big square walk around is a lovely walking track that not many people realize is even there. So I'll go to a neighborhood store and I'll just bundle up, go to a neighborhood store, get out of the car, wander around the store 2 or 3 times, then walk back to the car. A situation where you do what you got to do.
Mhm. Um, what's a typical day with of eating like for you?
A typical day. Well, I will normally get up and I will have my cup of tea or coffee and toast, and
Mhm.
that'll be it. Then maybe an hour or so later, I'll have an egg or some cereal or what you would call breakfast. And
Mhm.
I love to cook breakfast, but I don't like doing it in the morning. So I end up making breakfast, if you will, at 10:30, 11 o'clock. Um, in the afternoon, I might have some granola or some fruit and yogurt. And then I'll have an early dinner, like 4:30, 5 o'clock. And then I'll probably eat again, maybe some more fruit or a banana or just like a quick sandwich um, at night. So I eat several small meals a day. Now, if we're having something like the kids want pizza, then we'll get the pizza around 3 o'clock and everybody will sit down and have an early 3 o'clock dinner. But that way I can have 1 or 2 pieces then, and then I can stop. And then maybe at 7 o'clock, I can have another 1 or 2 pieces just so that I can enjoy the same things, but I have to do it in a much smaller, much more spread out level.
Mhm.
I'm like a rabbit, I eat constantly.
It helps control the weight also because that way
Yeah,
because when you
yeah,
eat
no,
bigger meals, you tend to um,
no, I
uh,
and that's something that I did do when I
yeah.
was younger. It was no problem for me to eat 2 times a day, but I would be so full, almost if you will, Thanksgiving dinners twice a day. Well, it's
Mhm.
not so much that I was gaining so much weight as I was so uncomfortable. So it manages the weight naturally. It it's really a good thing. In fact, if I didn't have an incurable disease, it would be a good way to live.
Yeah. Have you ever had to change your diet due to medication or treatment side effects?
Not really, no. It's always been pretty much the thing is and again, this is where I was lucky, if you can call having an incurable disease lucky.
Mm.
But this is where I was lucky is that because I learned early in life how to eat healthy, when there's any side effects, usually it's a side effect like, well, actually there was one. It was lactose. I had a side effect of one of my things that caused cheese and milk to cause stomach pain. But again, if you're used to eating healthy, you say, okay, what adjustment needs to be made? And I made it.
Mhm.
So it it may sound flippant, and it probably is, but if you have I know what my body is doing. And a lot of people who probably have diseases like mine also do. But most people who don't. They don't realize what their body's doing. They don't know how to describe how they're feeling. They can't look at themselves and say, I feel this way, therefore I must this. Most people say, I feel this way. Ugh.
Uh, do you find hydration affects your breathing
Yes,
or energy levels?
yes. that's just all part of a healthy eating thing. I have my tea in the morning or coffee, and I do drink some juice, but 90% of what I drink is water
Mm.
because hydration is very, very important. In fact, it's super duper important because remembering we were talking about the liver component. And this is not medical advice. This is not to be said, some doctor told me this because they didn't. But I often wonder is if the reason that my liver, yeah, that one, it's very close to the liver, by the way. My liver is not clogging up like a lot of people's do, is the fact that I'm putting so much water into my system that I'm filtering the crud out before it gets to a point where it's too big to come out.
Mm.
So I'm filtering out smaller before it gets bigger.
Yeah. Uh,
Excuse me.
let's see. AATD is underdiagnosed. What do you wish more doctors knew about? What do you wish more doctors and medical professionals understood about it?
Well, it's not so much the understood as the education because AATD or DT or whatever it is underdiagnosed because nobody looks for it. I mean, remember what I was saying about COPD?
Mm-hmm.
It is a blood test. That's all. A very simple blood test. Like I said, you can
Yeah.
do it at home. But I wish more doctors would, when their patients walk in and say, "Hey, I'm having some trouble breathing," maybe instead of just handing them the albuterol inhaler, they would say, "Hey, take this blood test."
Mm-hmm.
Because the chances are the doctor's going to be requesting some blood work anyway. So it's just a little tiny extra tube if you're doing it that much. So just take it to the lab and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and instead, they hand them the quick fix and move to the next patient. And it isn't in until, as in my case, literally 30 years before anybody said, "Hey, take the blood test." In fact, in my case, it's even worse because they saw the holes in my lungs and said, maybe we should have him take the blood test.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Uh, what what's one thing people you wish people knew about living with AATD?
What I wish people would know is number one, and I know everybody kind of knows this, but is how much bad smoke is for you. And I'm not saying smoking per se, but even people who are sitting at the barbecue and standing next to the cook going, "Oh, that smells good," and all that stuff. It's smoke. It is
Mm-hmm.
really honest to be smoke. It is something is burning, and that is bad. And I know Canada had the wildfires. Was it last year or year before? I'm not sure. I don't remember. Whereas, the wildfires were blowing the smoke down into the United States. Smoke is bad. And everybody needs to know that. And, so many people look at it and say, "Oh, I don't have breathing issues. I'll go out, even though it's a little misty, foggy out there." Smoke is bad. Everyone should take a minute and say, "Hey, that smoke is bad. I'm going to be careful. I'm going to wear a mask. I'm going to cover my face because, your lungs can be damaged. Maybe you don't have the thing that I have. Maybe you have the alpha 1 antitrypsin. But again, it's bad. So I wish people would look at themselves and say, hey, I'm not telling you you need to live healthier. You just need to think a minute.
How can listeners help raise awareness and support or support the Alpha One community?
Well, that's a hard question. And actually, I know you sent these to me, and I read it and I reread it.
Mhm.
As far as raising awareness goes, I kind of avoid that. I don't shy away from it, but I kind of avoid it because what I want people to see in me is that, not that it's no big deal. That's the wrong thing to say. But I want people to see in me that you can live with this. This is an okay thing. Yes, precautions must be taken, but you can live with it. But what I do as far as advocating for Alpha One isn't so much the standing on a tree stump and saying and wearing purple t-shirts and saying I have Alpha One, fear me. But I have been participating in up to five research studies that I am now or have been involved in to try to find the cure. And you mentioned the infusion. Right now, I was in one that involved a what they call a subcutaneous injection, which is basically they send you a pen that you slap into your thigh, and that would be a an alternative to the weekly injection or infusion. Now, for me, there were more side effects than not when I was involved with it. But, if something like that could happen, imagine for me now, and I know I've described it, but imagine for me that, okay, once a week I have to slap myself with a injector and then I get back to life, as opposed to waking up on every week, every Monday morning, preparing the little hospital room that I have to set up, taking an hour or so of an injection, talking to the nurse, taking vital signs, and then being tired the rest of the day because of the thing. So I may not advocate and jump up and down and scream, world, listen to me, I have Alpha One. But by the same token, I am looking at the Alpha One Foundation and saying, hey, let's find out what we can do.
Uh, uh, so thank you so much for for sharing your journey with us today. Your ability to find humor in the midst of challenges is truly inspiring, and I know your story will resonate with so many people that are navigating Alpha One Atrypsin deficiency, um, or any chronic illness. Um, to our listeners and viewers, if you found this episode helpful, please take a moment to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Rare Chef, and to the Rare Connection podcast on your favorite platform. Your support helps us continue to bring these important stories to light. Um, I'd love to hear I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can send me
Okay.
you can send me a text message through the audio link on the YouTube show. You can comment below on YouTube, or you can send me a link through the show notes send me a text link in the show notes on the audio side of things. I read every message and love to connect with you. If you like to support the show, you can click the support the show link on the show notes on the audio side. Please note that while I'm looking toward the 501c3 status, Donations are not yet tax deductible, but every contribution helps keep this mission going. Before we go, I want to remind anyone who might be struggling, you are not alone. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please reach out for help. In the U.S., you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Help is available, and there are people who care and want to support you. Thank you for being here and for listening and for being part of this community. Until next time, take care and stay strong and keep the conversation going. Thanks.
And if they still hear me, remember.
Yep, I can still hear you.
Okay, I was going to say happiness, it moves very slowly. You have to stop and wait for it to catch up. Don't chase it. You'll never catch it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.